Hey everyone, how's everyone doing? I'm just setting up a couple of different things, but I'm happy that you are here. All right, we'll be starting in a few minutes, but if you want, first of all, let me know if you can see me and let me know if you can hear my voice. It should be good actually. The connection should be stable and good. And you can use, if you have any questions, you can always use the uh, YouTube chat to ask the questions. So you can always use YouTube chat to ask questions. Let me know if you can hear me and let me know if everything looks good on your end. It should be good connection. I mean, I just got uh, this AT&T fiber. Really, the stream current bitrate is lower than the recommended bitrate. Even with AT&T fiber, it's telling me this all of this stuff. All right. Anyway, we'll be starting in a few minutes. All right. So if you want, you can introduce yourself in the YouTube chat. You can go ahead and where are you from? That will be good. And your iOS developer, just something about yourself. You can use YouTube chat. I'm always looking at the chat. And there might be a little bit of a delay. I think that's just built in. So it might take a couple of seconds for you to hear what I'm saying. But give me a thumbs up or something in the YouTube chat if you can hear me, if you can see my screen. We'll be learning about the MV pattern. So that will be fun. But yeah, please use the YouTube chat for asking questions and just letting me know that if everything works, is working out. All right. We'll wait for a couple of more minutes. I don't really see anything going on in YouTube chat right now. I'm just going to say testing. Is it even working or not? Live chat, top chat, all messages are visible. Okay, I guess top chat. If you can hear, okay, there we go. Sound is crystal clear, same for video. Thank you so much, Rodank. And go ahead and talk about a little bit about where are you all logging in from. Always good to hear people logging in from the different parts of the world. I'm, by the way, in Houston, Texas, and there is a storm. Well, it's not really a storm, but I guess some um, lightning and maybe some rain going on outside right now. So hopefully I won't lose power. All right, good, good, good. Everything is good. Looks like everyone is able to see it. And if you have any questions, you can always ask question in the um, YouTube chat, by the way. All right, once we get started. We're going to be starting shortly. So everyone is excited about WWDC next week. I'm always excited about WWDC to see what they release so I can start learning those things, maybe update some courses, create some new courses. But right now, I'm working on a different course, which is building reminders application using Swift data. And after that, I have plans to do Supabase course because a lot of people have been asking about Supabase. So, and the list is long. I mean, I think I'll be busy for the whole year. Then there's Solid Principles course, Vision OS course. So that is going to be it's going to be a busy year. It's going to be fun. Philippines, awesome. I've heard good things about Philippines. Great food, also beautiful place. Never been there. Hopefully one day I'll reach Philippines. All right. Okay, let's go ahead and get started, okay? All right, first of all, thank you everyone for logging in. And I'm going to be talking about MV pattern. All right. Now you might be wondering, hold on a second, what is MV pattern? I've never heard of MV pattern. Are we talking about MVVM? Well, it's similar, but not exactly the same. Now, a little bit of a backstory before I actually get to the backstory is I talked about the MV pattern probably around 2 years ago, if I remember correctly. All right. Um, and it didn't really got a good reception at that time. Like 2 years ago when I talked about it, I actually have posted some articles on it. Let me actually see if I can find those, and I will share all of those different things with you. So probably around 2 years ago, I started publishing some articles over here. You can see on my website azamsharp.com, and let me see if I can find those things. Yeah, so it's right here, it's right here, it's right here, it's right here. You can see I was writing a lot of things about, yeah, 2022. You can see the date, even before that, I guess. So I was talking about it. It didn't really get a good reception. I mean, people were like, oh no, this is completely wrong. You should never do that. And I'm like, okay, well, I like building apps this way, and it's working out for me. So I just continue with my quest, and I wrote more and more and more articles and make more videos and all that stuff. And now the funny part, which I see is it's kind of funny because now we are in 2024, and I see a lot of people are moving in that direction. And I'm always happy to see that because at least, I mean, even if they don't end up using it or, they're at least trying it out. Maybe it will fill their needs. So I think that is the most interesting part, that how things have actually changed in a span of only 2 years. So that's what I'm excited about. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. And you'll see that it's similar to MVVM, but it's a little bit of a different thinking that you do. So my name is Mohammad Azam. I am an iOS developer, and I am a coding bootcamp instructor. And by the way, if anyone has any questions between the session, you can use the YouTube chat to ask questions. That's the only way to ask questions. I'm also instructor at azamsharp.school. That's my brand new website. You can definitely check it out, azamsharp.school. And if you stay till the end, I'll have a coupon for you for one of my architecture courses on SwiftUI, so you can definitely watch that. Now, in 2019, Apple announced SwiftUI, and I was actually really happy with SwiftUI because I was already working a lot with React and Flutter, and SwiftUI was kind of very similar. I mean, it was a declarative framework, and after that, I start thinking that, okay, hold on a second, which pattern that I'm going to be using? So I didn't really pay that much attention. I just tried to do whatever else other people were doing in 2019 and started with MVVM. Nothing wrong with that. Started with MVVM just like most people. And I started like writing books on MVVM, and I went a little bit crazy. I mean, I did some presentation on MVVM. I was a guest in different podcasts. I was writing very, articles on MVVM, on publishing on Medium. I was creating more videos on MVVM. I was writing more articles and videos and courses, and it was a lot of stuff. So I was doing a lot of stuff when I started, but whenever I was building apps for my courses, for clients, for whatever, I was always like, it cannot be like this. I'm doing a lot of work to get simple things being done. And the reason was that I was already working a lot with Flutter, and I was already working with React, and they were very similar to SwiftUI. So I'm like, well, I can do this in React in much easier way. Why do I have to do these all view models and all that complexity? And it's taking literally forever to even design 4 or 5 screens. Let's take an example of a client server application. All right, not core data. I guess we don't really have time for core data right now. So a client-server application which consists of, how many are these? 5 screens, all right? So let's take this journey with me. 5 screens, 5 screens, 5 screens, 5 view models. Everyone with me at this point? Because this is where it's like, oh, no, I'm just going to create one view model. Well, usually, if you're following MVVM, if I'm following MVVM, this is what my architecture, my separation will look like. Now, you might say that, well, that's not how I use MVVM. Okay, good for you. Maybe you don't use it like that. But I guess if I ask 100 people, I would say 90 plus people are going to say, yeah, this is kind of like, sounds about right. This is how I would structure my MVVM app, right? Everyone agrees with that at least? Or do we have to spend time over here also? If you're building an app with 5 different screens, not 5 different views, screen means an actual screen, and views are basically reusable entities. So we're talking about screens over here. Although screens are views, but we're treating them as a much bigger parent, the container that contains other views. All right? So hopefully we can all agree on this so that I can move forward. Movie list screen, movie list view model. Review list screen, review list view model. We have all done that. Right? I mean, I have done this because I have created these apps for my courses and for clients, and that's just a normal structure which I follow. Nice and simple. Every screen will have a view model. And then if I'm talking about the client-server application, then you can see that every single screen, right over here, here, and here, it will have their own corresponding view models. This one, completely different view model, by the way, right? And all of these view models are conforming to observable object, by the way. And what happens when you conform to an observable object? That's the, you want me to write the whole thing? You can write it if you want. Observable object means source of truth, right? So we have 5 or 6 different sources of truth because, we created 5 or 6 different view models. And each of these view models will need to communicate with HTTP client, some sort of a service that's going to access the web server, get the data, add the data, get the reviews, add the reviews, update some stuff. So each of these view models, sources of truth, will need to be passed in HTTP client as a dependency. Okay. So this is kind of like how it will look like. I mean, if you want to take it at a surface level, again, you might say, well, this is not how I do it. Okay, again, 90% of the people or 95% of the people will write it like this. All right, and I've done the research. So this is how pretty much we can create a view model conforming to observable object or conforming or using the observable macro. If you are doing iOS, 17 or something, you can use observable macro, observable. So movie list view model, it will have all the movies which are publish movies property, and we are passing in HTTP client protocol or HTTP client protocol because we can mock it, I guess. And then we have a fetch method. So we will have one of this, one of this, one of this for every single screen, of course, keeping in mind that every time we use an observable object, that is source of truth. All right? Okay. Again, if anybody has any questions regarding this, you can let me know in the chat. We're just moving along like slowly, and then I'll show you some code. All right. Now, if I'm creating a screen or if I'm going from one screen to the other screen, this is usually the code that I have to write. Like I can say movie list screen, I need to pass in a dependency to the view model. So movie list view model, and I need to pass a dependency to the HTTP client because the movie list view model requires HTTP client. So I'm going to pass in HTTP client, right? All right. Or maybe you have a HTTP client factory that's going to check some build settings, and if you're running it through the test, it will be mock HTTP client versus a real HTTP client. We're just ignoring those details right now. All right. Okay, well, the source of truth in a client-server app is the server. All right, just remember that. In a client-server application, the source of truth is the server. Server is deciding that the data, what you need to display. The other thing, so just remember that part. Other thing is that sometimes we have view hierarchy which is different, which is very much nested. And sometimes a very nested bottom leaf view might say that, hey, I need the data from the top view. Now, if you're using SwiftUI, plain vanilla SwiftUI, then you will say that, well, I'm just going to use environment object, and I can pass the data from the screen to the nested views. But if we are using view model approaches, then we can't really access environment object inside the view model. Well, at least not easily. We can write this kind of like a weird code. And the problem with this kind of a code where you're passing in the environment object into the view model is that there will be a time when you will say that, okay, I don't know who is the source of truth because I've already passed the environment object into 5, 6 different level deep into my views. So that's another problem that you basically face. But going back to this approach, this one, which I've already seen, every single screen that we are creating, if you're just following the classic MVVM, then we add a view model for that particular screen. All right. So that is going to end up a lot of screens with a lot of view models and then a lot of code which will look like this, where you have to inject every single view model with HTTP client, and then you will have to pass in the dependencies from one movie screen to the other by passing in the view model, by passing in the HTTP client to the view model. That becomes really messy situations. So how can we find out that maybe there is a different way? So I went back and I tried to study the presentation model, and you can see the data. Presentation model is nothing new. And by the way, presentation model is the MVVM, meaning if you look at this article, just search for presentation model by Martin Fowler and go ahead and read this article. You will say that, oh, wait, isn't this like the MVVM? And it is. MVVM is just a marketing name that Microsoft came up with when they introduced WPF. And one of those things that Martin talked about, which I pointed out over here, is that in the article, Martin Fowler was showing that he was doing binding from the text box to the view model and from the view model to the text box manually. And he said over here that ideally some kind of framework, maybe in the future, could handle this binding, which I'm hoping someday with the technologies like .NET data binding. And he was right, because WPF was introduced by Microsoft, and it did have that kind of a binding. All right, so if you look at the WPF code, it will have that kind of a binding. So in WPF, if you have ever worked with WPF, you have a UI file, which is a XAML file, and you have a C# file. So there are two different files, and then you can do bindings from the C# file to this file, and two-way bindings. But if I had to do that in SwiftUI, I don't really have to create any view model. I mean, I can just do it like this. The add movie view contains these state properties that I can use, and that will bind successfully. So I didn't really have to recreate a view model because the view itself contains those features using the state values. Now, how would I do validation? Oh, I can do validation kind of like this. In the view itself, I can create some property that is going to validate. And I can attach it right over here. At this point, people start saying, hold on, hold on, hold on. How are you going to test it, man? I need to test everything. Every single thing, every single line I'm going to type, I'm going to test it. Okay, before we do that, we can, well, actually, we can skip that one. If you want to do testing, then you can extract out the actual logic of your view into a struct, not an observable object, a struct, just like an integer is a struct of value type. And then you can go ahead and do all your testing that you want. Now, would I do that for my previous page, the previous screen that I was creating, like this one? No, probably not. I don't think for me, this is complicated enough to extract out into a struct and do this kind of a testing. So does that mean I would never test this? Well, I will test it. I will test it using my passive testing using the end-to-end testing code. All right, so I can do end-to-end testing, I can do UI testing in Xcode, and I can test this. But these kind of things, you know, if you want to test it out, you can actually go ahead and write unit tests for the actual implementation details, which is the actual function is empty or white space, or is empty or white space. So you can write tests for those things and actual unit tests, because these are just extensions to the string type. So go ahead and write the unit test. I mean, nobody's stopping you to writing a unit test, right? So what I found out and what I learned after creating apps, a lot of different apps for my courses and for clients, is in SwiftUI, the view itself is the view model. Now, I'm going to pause over here because I'm sure a lot of people will have questions regarding this particular statement. So I'm going to pause over here and I'm going to wait for you to ask those questions, because I'm sure everybody is like, hold on a second, what is wrong with Azam? And so go ahead. I'm going to wait. You're going to ask questions. I know you have questions from this slide alone. All right, I'll keep watching the YouTube chat. If you have any question, go ahead and please type in the question. That's why we are doing this, so I can answer your question. Maybe I'll learn, you know, we'll all learn together. So that's the whole point of this live stream. All right, so going back to the view is a view model, and that is true. View itself is the view model, and we have actually seen it because the view itself has a capability of binding. Remember in WPF, we had two different files. We had XAML file and we have a C# file. Well, we don't really have that in SwiftUI. We have just one file. It's called the view. It's kind of unfortunate that it's called the view. Maybe it would be a good idea to call it component. You can't really call it widget, because that's, I think you have different things, like widgets are different, right? But a component would have been a much better name. And keep in mind that the view, add movie view, there is not a single line of code over here that is putting pixels on the screen. Think about that for a moment. Go for a walk and think, well, don't go for a walk right now, but when you go for a walk, think about that. Do you see any code over here that is painting pixels on the screen? You might say, hold on a second, here it is. Text field, here it is, the button. Not really. I mean, the button, if you look at the debug window, if you look at into the actual, when you're debugging it, you will see that the button is just declarative. It's just a struct, right? Just like the view that you have made over here, it's just a struct. It's not doing any painting. It's just telling SwiftUI that you're gonna create a button. So this is just a declaration, and something else, maybe a UI button, will be created in the background. All right. Even though, I mean, if you look at that window that I'm talking about, I think it's called like a debug window or something. Button, I think it maps to UI button or something else. Like a list will map to UI collection view and so on. All right, so we go back to this slide. View is the view model. Now, again, this does not mean that you should start writing all your logic, meaning the domain logic over there. This only means that the presentation and transformation logic can belong in the view. How do you test it? You can extract it out if it's complicated. If you don't extract it out, then you can just test it using snapshot testing. You can test it using UI testing. You can test it using end-to-end testing or view inspector testing. There are other ways. Now, going back to this example, which we covered, actually, these should be screens, by the way. I think I misspelled. I shouldn't be calling them views. Screens, okay. And what we're doing over here is we're trying to go through these view models, right? And we're trying to, view model will have access to the HTTP client, and it's just getting the data from the server. But what if we allow our add movie view to directly talk to the HTTP client? How about that? Right? How would you think that that can be done? All right. So let me first show you some code where I am doing this. Now, I'm not saying that you should do that for every single app, but this can be a good technique for where you don't really have to share data that much deep, and you don't really have that much business logic on the client side. So let me go ahead and pull up that code, and I can show you. Again, it's not for every single type of app that you will ever design, but it is something different. Okay, let me go ahead and it's a very simple app. It just goes and fetches orders from it fetches orders from my own server. It's like coffee orders. Let me go ahead and run this first so that you have an idea. It's nothing crazy. It just fetches orders. See if it's fetching order or not. Maybe the server is sleeping. There should be 2 orders over here, hopefully. We'll see if it loads up those orders. Okay. Here we go. So there are 2 orders. You can see the detail of the order, or you can go ahead and place a new order. But let's check out the implementation. The coffee order list screen. The job of the coffee order list screen is to list all the orders. I'm going to access my HTTP client from my environment. We're going to take slow steps so that you can all see that this is one of the ways that you can do that. All right. No view models in this approach. I can show you code for the view model. It's a lot of, it's different view models, like a lot of 3 or 4 view models that I have. Actually, you can see that the view models are over here, but we're not going to use those because this is just to show you that how you can use the environment, get access to the HTTP client. So the first thing we're going to do, or we're doing, is we're trying to access the HTTP client directly from the environment. Then in the task, we call load orders, which is this function. We call this function load orders. And you can see that we're just doing it all inside the view. Now you might say, hold on a second, how can you do that? This is business logic inside the view. This is not business logic. What business logic? What's going on? What's so business about this? We're making a request to a server. We're getting some data, and then we are just assigning it to our local state. Local state is right there. So now your next question might be, hold on a second, how do I test this? Now you're inside the view. Well, you test your actual integration test by writing a test for your actual HTTP client. What exactly are you trying to test? Are you trying to test that the orders are displayed on the screen? So you're testing the UI. There's a thing that you can use to test your UI. It starts with UI test. And UI testing is available, and you can do it. There's nobody stopping you to write a UI test so that you can make sure that your coffee orders are displayed on the screen, right? Nobody is doing that. Questions? Now, this is not the solution for every single application that you will design. And I'll show you that sometime I will use this if all I'm doing is communicating with the server and I'm trying to, add something to the server or remove something from the server. But I don't use it for every single app. Now, how do I get this thing in the environment? Well, I created an environment key. You can create those custom environment keys, and then I just injected HTTP client. Now keep in mind that you don't have to inject the concrete implementation of HTTP client. You can always use HTTP client protocol, and that will allow you to also mock the HTTP client so that you can provide some dummy data so that you can inject the dummy data into your view in your Xcode previews. So I'm going to actually write it over here because I'm sure somebody will. You can use HTTP client protocol, which will allow for mocking. All right. I'm not doing that. I'm just keeping it simple, but you can do that. So you can see that how simple things becomes. If you have a client-server application, let's say that if you're working on an application which is displaying a list of Pokemon and you don't really control the server, or either you do, well, okay, go ahead and get the HTTP client over here. All right, so Andy is saying, I'm writing an app that is combination of your MV pattern and domain-driven design. Your config file in the slide a while ago that contains logic is my aggregate root, one per screen. It is an observable object passed with the environment thoughts. Yes, so we will be actually, Andy, thank you for your question. We will be talking about that in a couple of minutes. Although I don't create observable objects per screen, because if I'm creating observable object per screen, then we are back to MVVM or view model per screen. I create observable objects when there's a new source of truth or when I am crossing into a bounded context, which I guess you're talking about domain-driven design principles. So we're gonna see a little bit later about that. So thank you. So this is one of the techniques that you can use, the one that I'm showing you. And in this technique, you have access to the HTTP client right inside your view itself. Now, one thing that I don't like about this is if I'm trying to add something, like add coffee ordered screen, right? So if I go to add coffee ordered screen, the add coffee ordered screen can also access the HTTP client right from the environment. It's in the environment, everyone can access it. And then it can place a new order. Okay, that's fine. The problem comes that after placing the order, because the add coffee order screen is a modal, actually let me show you, probably I should run this. And let's see if the order goes through. Okay, so this is the coffee order list screen. I'm going to say add order. And let's say that I am adding an order for Steven. And the coffee name is just hot coffee. I think that's the price. So 5.0 and a medium is fine. If I'm going to say place order, you can see Steven is added right there. But the modal, the communication from the modal back to the parent is a little bit weird because I had to pass in the binding orders to the add coffee order screen, which I don't like. The other way that you can do that is to expose some closure that can fire from the add coffee order screen that is handled in the coffee order list screen. So there are multiple ways that you can do that. I don't like either of those ways, although you can do that. All right, so you can see that I was actually calling the closure also. That's one of the ways. Question from IOSM. I personally do create custom property wrapper for services, a bit complex, but more Swift friendly. Firebase already do that. Okay, that's pretty good actually. I didn't know that Firebase was doing that. Actually, no, wait, authorization, right? Authorization and all that. I think Firebase was doing that. Okay, that's good. Yes. And if you look at the implementation of the HTTP client, one thing to note about HTTP client is um, it's stateless. I mean, this is a generic HTTP client, so sorry about all the code. But HTTP client is not maintaining the state. It is simply getting the information and returning the information. It does not maintain the state. It does not hold on to the state or anything. It's stateless. This means that you can use your HTTP client and you can use any implementation you want. You can use HTTP client in your view controller UI kit application. All right. Okay. So that's the thing that I don't like. I mean, if I go to the coffee order list screen, you can see that I'm showing the add coffee order screen in a modal, in a sheet. And I have multiple ways to update these orders because I need to update these orders so that the coffee order list screen can refresh, can show me the new order. So one way was, okay, I'm going to do a closure over here and then I can add the order. The other way is to pass the orders, right? So that's kind of weird. I mean, I don't really like that approach, but it works, but I don't really like it, to be really honest, all right? So this was the technique where you are directly accessing HTTP client in your view. You are triggering your HTTP client right from the view, getting the information, and putting the information in the local private state. Local private state means that this state is only available to the view, this view, coffee order list screen, not any other view. Sometimes you have logic in your code, in the client-side code, and you also want the data to be available to everyone, right, globally. And I think that is what Andy was talking about. So let me show you that kind of a code. But before we do that, let's take a look at how that will look like. All right. So this is just the same example I'm going through. You can see that we are using the environment object, environment value, HTTP client, and all that. This is use case number 2. All right. This is a little bit different, which I think Andy was also talking about. In the middle, you have, instead of directly accessing from the view to the HTTP client, this is using aggregate model. Now, you can call it aggregate model, you can call it store, whatever works for you. The name is not important. What is important is that what's the job of this aggregate model or data store. So let's go back over here. And this is a diagram that is taken directly from WWDC 2020 Data Essentials in SwiftUI. By the way, they were not calling it aggregate root, sorry. So I added that aggregate root part, all right? So just make sure that this was added by me. So what Apple was saying is that there's some sort of a layer that your view communicates with, and multiple views can communicate with that layer. And the job of that layer is to get the entities like customers, orders, catalog items, inventory, fulfillment information, whatever. And all of the views are just accessing that one layer. Now, you want to call that layer aggregate root, you want to call that layer data store, that's up to you, that's perfectly fine. And that is, I think, a more common technique when you are building much larger applications where you may have logic in your observable objects. Now, the first complaint when some people see this is, hold on a second, so one file with everything? Come on. No, nobody said one file with everything. I mean, if you have much larger application, you can divide it. But before I do that, Apple sample apps, Fruit and Food Truck are using that approach. Actually, if you see over here, and this is, most of the people have not seen this, there is a session. You will have to search what the year is. It's called Use Xcode for Server-Side Development, and this is Apple's code that what they are doing. you can see that they have a aggregate model, food truck model right there, which is an observable objects right there. You can see food truck, you can see orders, you can see server donuts. What do you see? Something that is very different over here. You see that the food truck model, you can call it food truck store, by the way. I know food truck model might be like, hey, are they calling it model? Food truck store. That's managing the entire state for the whole application. See that? It's managing the truck, it's managing the orders, it's managing the server donuts. And how do they load the donuts? Well, it's right there inside that observable object, the single source of truth. You can have more sources of truth, but they are using single source of truth. Even in a small to medium size app, that will be probably more than enough. It will act as a view model, but the reason, so the question from Mountain Hunter is, it will act like a view model. It will act like a view model, but unlike view model, we are not creating food truck model for every single screen. And that difference is a very big difference. So the reasoning of why we added the food truck model or the food truck store is very different. It manages the entire state of your entire global state of your application. You can add more observable objects, and I'll show you that what goes behind, what thinking goes behind, like why do you add more. But for a medium or even a small size app, I mean, food truck app is a medium size app, I would say. You can get away with just creating one observable object, depending again on your app. So how will that look like? Now I'm calling it model over here. Again, you can call it store. You can call it, I don't know what, the movie store. I mean, you can go ahead and write movie store over here. So I have this model, or I don't like the name model. I would call it movie store. So movie store, movie aggregate model, whatever you want to call it, movie store. And this kind of manages the entire things about the movies, the reviews. And it will have all the functions. You can see all the functions for adding a movie, populating a movie, top reviews, getting the reviews, sorting the movie reviews, sorting the movies, getting featured movies. And then once you create this movie store, you inject it into the environment object, and then you can access everywhere. See that, how simple it is? So if you have a screen that is saying, hey, I want all the reviews. Remember the review screen that we talked about? Well, just go ahead and get access to the environment object and get the reviews from there. You don't have to create like a review list, view model, review add, view model, review detail, view model, 3 view models. You can just get it from right there. Get it from the environment. All right. So you can see add movie view. We're simply getting the model, the store, from the environment object, and then we are adding the movie. Done. Now, a common question people ask is that, hold on a second. If you have this one app, or if you just created one, and you can create more, but if you just created one data store or the aggregate model, and that's in the environment object, so every single view who is using that environment object will refresh just because I added a one movie? I mean, that's a valid question, right? But no, the answer is every single view who is using the environment object is not going to refresh completely. First of all, the only views that are evaluated are the views inside your navigation stack. That's the first thing, right? So how many views are there in your navigation stack? Okay, let's say 5, let's say 10. I mean, I don't know how kind of a deep navigation you're doing, but let's say 10. Okay, so if I add a movie and those 10 screens or views in the navigation stack are using environment object, do you really think that all those 10 views will get re-rendered again? That's a question for you. All right. If those views, if you have 10 views in the navigation stack and I add a movie, do you really think that those 10 views will re-render from scratch because I added a movie? What do you think? What do you think the answer to that question is? I mean, that's a valid question, right? Because if I add a new movie and I had 10 different views, 20 different views in the navigation stack, and just by adding a movie, all of the 20 views had to re-render, wow, that's going to kill the performance just because I added a movie. All right? Okay, so I'll give you the answer. The answer is no, they are not going to get re-rendered just because I added a movie. And the reason is even if you have 300 views in the navigation stack, I'm not sure what kind of app you're building where you have 300 views just sitting there in the navigation stack, and I change or add a movie, then only the controls, only the views that are using something from the environment object that has changed will get re-rendered. All right. And you can easily test this out. You can easily test this out. Let me see if I have the code over here, right? Okay, I'll show you this code. I'll show you this code, add coffee order screen. And I'll put in the body, I'll go ahead and put aggregate root per tab, and that is completely different domain. Okay, yeah. So let me see, what is that? The self.print changes, print changes. Okay. Sorry, it's raining outside and it's thunderstorm, so it might get a little bit crazy. Okay. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm putting this print changes over here, okay? So anytime I'm going to write something in the text box, this body, we want to see that how many times this view is getting, the body is getting evaluated or the whole thing is getting rendered. So let me go ahead and run this. It's a simple test that you can do. All right, let's see why it's taking so much time. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. You can see right now that my body is evaluated. This is printing. So this means that the body was fired. It's evaluated. It's doing some stuff. And as soon as I go ahead and type something, let's say A, B, C, see that? See that right there? Every time I type something, this code is getting executed, the code in the body. All right? The code in the body is getting executed. But that does not mean that the whole view is getting re-rendered. This simply means that the view is getting re-evaluated. SwiftUI is checking very quickly that what has changed and what has not changed. So only the things that are changed are getting re-rendered. Okay? All right, so another question, let's see, let's go back to the question. So Andreas is asking, very interesting, but to what extent will a real application using this pattern be able to process at least 50,000 orders? I don't think it will. Well, the first question is, why do you think it will not? What is stopping you to process whatever you're trying to do? I think that's the question for your question. And if we go down over here, now I think you're talking about large applications. So I'll move to the large applications. But first I'll show you this particular screen. And process at least 50,000 orders I don't think it has anything to do with what we are discussing. I mean, if you're trying to process 50,000 orders, you probably have to do it in the background or you have to send it in batches. Right? So you can do that. You can just set up your HTTP client to send these orders in batches and mark them processed if they're processed. Okay, so looking at over here, so this is what we have learned, that when I was doing MVVM, every screen had a corresponding view model. But once we start looking into the MV, and by the way, MV is not really like an actual name, but I think now everybody calls it MV. And no, I didn't really invented MV. It's just how Apple is writing their apps, and I think people started calling MV. All right. So much less code, much less to manage, and now we have this aggregate model or a data store which is managing the entire application. Now, again, a small or a medium-sized application. Now, you might say, okay, hold on a second. What about bigger apps? You seriously cannot have one observable object which will have like 3,000 lines of code, right? And yeah, you shouldn't. So this is again from Apple slides from 2020 Data Essentials. I just added these names to it. You can have multiple observable objects, but what if you can have multiple observable object? Isn't that MVVM, multiple observable object based on the screen? Well, that's the question. It's not based on the screen. You see that? I'm basing my observable objects, if I'm creating observable object, based on the bounded context of the application, based on the feature you're working, based on the boundary that you're working. And that is just such an important concept of domain-driven design. So over here, I'm going to create another observable object for catalog. I'll call it catalog store. Well, what's the job of the catalog store? Well, the job of the catalog store is to do everything related to the catalog, add items to the catalog, sort the catalogs, delete items from the catalog, get featured items from the catalog, delete, updating the catalog. Okay, what about fulfillment? Well, there's a different observable object, fulfillment. It will be related to fulfillment. And you need to get all the fulfillment orders, you need to do this, you need to do that, all of those things. What about if they can talk to each other? How would they do that? That's a great question. How about if the catalog needs some information from fulfillment or fulfillment needs some information from catalog, right? In those cases, you have different things you can do. Usually this kind of thing, when you want something, if a catalog needs something from the fulfillment, then we should ask the question, where did the fulfillment get the information? Well, fulfillment used the HTTP client with a URL to some fulfillment service. Well, then go ahead and use that. Don't disturb the aggregate root fulfillment or data store. Just go ahead and get it from where the fulfillment got it from. I mean, fulfillment got it from somewhere, right? So just going to go ahead and get it from there. This kind of architecture you may have seen in a microservices also, where these services are running on kind of like different servers and they are managing different database, and sometimes the insurance database is like that manages the insurance. It's like, hey, I want the customer information. Should I go ahead and manage the customer database also? No, you shouldn't. If you want customer information, then where is the customer management microservice is getting its data? So go ahead and get it from there. All right, just use a service to get that data. Sometimes your single view is responsible for displaying the catalog information and also fulfillment. Maybe it's the admin view. Then yeah, in your application, you can in your view, you can have two environment objects, one for catalog, one for fulfillment. And this is what it's going to look like for a much larger applications. All right. I don't think something is bug or something is going on. Hold on a second. Sorry about that. I think it's like a bug is flying in my room. All right. So this is the architecture for if you're building large applications. You can see that these can represent a folder or they can represent a package dependency. It really depends on your project and how much things that you're trying to reuse. Catalog UI can contain all the UI for the catalog, the screens, the views, the reusable views. The catalog folder or the catalog package can contain all the different things, all the models like item, catalog category. You know, you need to know the domain to do these things. And catalog store, which manages the entire thing. And same thing with inventory, same thing with all of that. You can have in the middle, you have the data access part, which is your actual API stuff like my store kit, or you're just going to access that, and that is going to give you all the information. All right, so for larger application, you can use this kind of a architecture. I've actually written about this in my application. Sorry, in my article. I'll link the article in the YouTube chat. You can read the article. It's a pretty long article, but you can read this. It has a lot of links also over there. I think I've already talked about this. All right. Any questions? We're kind of like reaching the end of this particular live session. Hopefully you found it interesting. And my only thing is that you should try it out at least. You know, I'm not saying that this is good or bad or things like that. I'm saying that with open mind, maybe you're working on your pet project or your side project, try it out. Try how it feels, because everything is related to how it like looks and how it feels. You know, how it you can be more productive with these things. So try it out, see how it feels, and maybe it will work for you, maybe it won't work for you, but at least you know that you tried it out, and I think that's the important part. When I was learning SwiftUI in 2019, I just accepted MVVM. I created a lot of apps with MVVM. I was really not happy because I already knew React and Flutter, and I can do those things many very quickly. And you know, so I just surrendered to SwiftUI built-in architecture, and that led me to create much better applications, or much faster, much better, and easier. I don't have to pass in flags to my child view to say, hey, by the way, make sure to turn on this flag so the parent can update. I've seen that people doing that. I've done that too, and it was horrible. I don't want to do that anymore. Other thing is, if you are building, and I'm not going to go into that much detail, but if you're building Swift data applications, you will see that it's very hard to get it to work with MVVM platform. I mean MVVM pattern. It will actually it will be very hard to work. All right. Scripted Pixel, I really like the way the SwiftUI is doing this, coming from front-end web development using Vue. Yes. All right, so that is pretty much it. I'll link some articles. Let me actually go ahead and try to find those. azamsharp.com. I have a lot of videos also that you can watch. I mean, these articles are, this one especially is pretty big, but you can at least try it out. You can, you know, learn about these things. Apart from that, I also have courses. If you go to azamsharp.school, and I'll give you a discounted coupon. All right, if you go to azamsharp.school and if you go to courses, you can find my brand new course, which is SwiftUI architecture. This is the one that talks about a lot of stuff. It even goes into the detail of talking about nested observables. Sometimes you will use nested observables. I usually try to avoid those scenarios, but it is over there also. So you can see that migrating from MVVM to MV, aggregate models, stores, SwiftUI views, validation, navigation, and testing. A lot of sections on testing and all that stuff. So I'll give you the link to this course, and I believe I have a coupon for it. Oh yeah, there it is. So you will save, like, a coupon is I think like for 40% or something, but make sure that the coupon will expire on Friday, which is day after tomorrow probably. But that's pretty much it. Thank you so much. Hopefully you will try it out. I mean, that's all I can. I'm not going to say that what you're doing is wrong, what I'm doing is right, but I am going to say that at least try it out. I think trying out different patterns and getting a feel of how it looks I think that's the most important thing. So hopefully you will try it out. All right. Once again, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. I really appreciate you joining in. It was fun, and hopefully we can do this in the future too. All right. Thank you so much. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. Thank you. I'll be here for maybe a few more minutes if you have any questions. But apart from that, that concludes our session, the live session. All right, everyone, we're going to wrap up over here. Once again, thank you so much for coming.